Match of the season at Stamford Bridge, as Chelsea produced late chaos to emerge as 4-3 winners against Ten Hag's United. The manager's tactics produced a stunning match, but also an insight into what goes wrong for both sides in matches where they look poor. Without any further ado, let's take a look at the tactics beginning with Chelsea. When United were defending, they set up in a fairly standard 4-1-4-1 with the midfield looking to go man-to-man, as by going pivot to pivot, they would look to limit Chelsea's progression through the centre of the pitch, which could be effective at times as Chelsea found less success attacking through the middle of the pitch. But as we've seen throughout the season, Chelsea are a part of the cult of the midfield box, and Palmer rarely looked to stay wide in these build-up situations, often looking to drop in, allowing Gallagher to move off to the left-hand side and create a 2 versus 1 against Casemiro. And if Chelsea still had no success getting it into their pivots initially, Palmer could also drop into these regions, creating the overload there when needed, before then moving high up. And this was disastrous for United, as they left the most dangerous man on the pitch in tons of space. And we should take a moment to acknowledge how ridiculous Palmer was in this match, with the second most touches for Chelsea, which is impressive for an attacking player, as well as 8 key passes and 9 shots. So it's safe to say he was both a goal threat and a creative threat. United could not allow this midfield overload to go on for much longer, and as they were determined to stop Chelsea building through the centre, through their pivots, it was not a case of just dropping Mainu deep alongside Casemiro. Instead, it was Dalot who from left back would push in extremely central and was fairly man-oriented on Palmer. Of course, this left a gaping hole at left back, and Gusto looked to push high up early, asking Garnacho how disciplined he could be throughout the match. And for the most part, Garnacho was well disciplined in tracking his man. However, it only takes a moment to make the difference. And that is exactly what happened for the first goal. Dalot had been inside on Palmer, and Garnacho was on Gusto. But when United win the ball, they look to transition, but they immediately lose it, meaning Dalot is now stuck inside, and Garnacho is high up, meaning Gusto and Palmer have acres of space in that left-back zone. This allows Gusto to line up his pass and then eventually find Gallagher. And Chelsea were also forced to adapt to become more of an offensive threat. One of the ways this was achieved was by Palmer starting much wider and pinning Dalot in this region. When the centre-back was on the ball, Palmer could then drop, drawing Dalot with him, and this would allow Gusto to make the underlapping run. So Palmer had the option to play him in if Garnacho could not track him in these more central zones. But Chelsea had limited success with this ploy. Despite not getting on the score sheet in this match, Jackson showed excellent build-up play. And whether Palmer was central with Dalot or out wide, we saw Jackson looking to drop in to create the 2 versus 1 against Casemiro instead, and he would often drag the centre-back out with him. Chelsea did not tend to have runners to take advantage of this space created, but there was one occasion when they did, and that was for the second goal, where Palmer stayed wide with Dalot, and the midfield were man-to-man, so when Jackson dropped deeper, it would have been a 2 versus 1 against Casemiro, and Varane followed the forward deep instead. He found Cucurella, and the United back three was now stretched, leaving gaps between the men. This allowed the Chelsea man to make the run, and Antony, covering for the centre-back out of position, makes the foul. But the biggest weakness for Chelsea came when they were high up in the attack, as we could at times see both fullbacks pushing wider as the Blues looked to create an overload in these zones. At times, Fernandes would also wander higher and maybe even wider, once again looking to cause overloads in key areas. Of course, with Caicedo being the remaining deep man, he would be easily overloaded if there was a transition, both centrally or if United were building wide and the Colombian had to come across, it would then naturally create gaps that United looked dangerous in throughout the 90. And that won't be the last mention of weak midfields. And let's take a look at what United did on the ball. When United were building up, Chelsea tended to defend in a 4-2-3-1, and to begin the play, United would switch into a back three in different ways. If they were deep, Onana could join in to become the third man, with a centre-back temporarily moving into the midfield. Alternatively, Wan-Bissaka could drop in instead, whilst Casemiro was also capable of performing that same role. The goal of this back three was to draw Chelsea into a press, as with Jackson unable to cover all three men, when he pressed the central man and the ball went wide, it would usually draw Gallagher from the midfield, giving United the opportunity to overload that area. And when United did get higher up the pitch, their build-up shape was fluid or slightly disorganized depending on how you look at it. At times, it would be Wan-Bissaka and Dalot coming in alongside Casemiro to create the numerical advantage in this region, whilst allowing Menu and Fernandes to stay higher up the pitch. This shape could present many interesting opportunities for United, as crucially, it meant that both of their wingers remained in the wider regions, allowing United to create 1-versus-1 isolations on either side. And in this match, Antony looked like a particular threat up against Cucurella, often cutting in or hitting the byline to some success. But the way United used this 2-3 shape was interesting, as most sides would keep the inverted fullbacks fairly stationary in these zones. However, with these wider isolations often occurring, Ten Hag's fullbacks would instead often move high into the half space, looking to make underlapping runs, or instead create space for the switch to the winger. And we saw both Dalot and Wan-Bissaka operate in this manner. Alternatively, Wan-Bissaka in particular could look to overlap outside of Antony, allowing him into these central zones to potentially open up a shooting opportunity, but more frequently, it was all about creating the opportunity for combination play in these central zones. And United were looking to overload Zone 14 throughout the 90, much like Chelsea, which they did have some success with. However, this left them with a huge issue, as much like Caicedo on the other side, Casemiro also found himself highly isolated. So on the transition, Chelsea would often look to find Palmer, and Casemiro would be dragged across, creating easy opportunities for Chelsea to play through Manchester United's midfield. A ridiculously entertaining match, but one that also laid the weaknesses of both sides bare, with both midfields effectively being non-existent defensively. For the manager tactical score, Ten Hag earns a 2.5, as United were more reliant on opposition errors to make goal-scoring inroads. Poch doesn't fare much better, earning a 4.5 with his side looking vulnerable defensively throughout. But drop your ratings below. And if you like this, check out this in-depth video explaining what makes Arteta's tactics different this season. Click on screen now.